we're back to the shit show of French politics.
This is a podcast where I, Muriel, teach my husband Nast about French politics, which have been a bit hectic this election year 2022.
We are Muriel and Nast. And please, if anyone is listening and wants to engage with us and share their thoughts, their ideas and comments, just do the thing.
All right, so we are now 1 week after the second run of the French parliamentary election, and today I will be talking about the salient points of the parliamentary election fallout with the following subjects. So first, President Emmanuel Macron behaving like your worst toxic ex-boyfriend trying to gaslight you. Then the leftist coalition NUPES and the far-right Front National playing a contest of who has the biggest opposition group, that is. And finally, if we have time, the French Parliament fashion police. So starting with President Emmanuel Macron as a toxic ex. So 3 days after the second round of the parliamentary election, President Macron did a public address. So for any listener who missed the previous installments of this podcast, the French parliamentary election took place this year, 2 months after the presidential election, which saw President Macron being re-elected against Marine Le Pen in the second round. But the parliamentary election was a shockwave because of the three big blocs that we have right now in the French politics. So the leftist coalition bloc called the NUPES, the Macronist bloc composed of President Macron's party Renaissance, and by Macron and his centrist allies, and the far-right bloc by Marine Le Pen, which won a staggering 89 parliament member out of 577. It is unprecedented and quite worrying, to be honest. But in this situation, no one has the absolute majority, and especially the president doesn't have an absolute majority, which means that he's going to have to negotiate if he wants to pass any law. And this is very unprecedented for French politics because it is the first time this has happened in more than 20 years. Ever since the 2000s, especially when we've had the presidential election and parliamentary election back to back, the elected president has always won an absolute majority, which is why the French political system is so presidential in a way that also has no equivalent in Europe. And
at the same time, during that period, there has not been a re-election of a president.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it. So usually the first time a president was elected, there was a sort of honeymoon phase, and obviously...
and it lasted 4 years.
Yes, or sometimes less. But here it was the first time that we had a president that was re-elected, so there was no honeymoon phase. And yeah, let's face it, quite a significant lot of people were wary, let's say, of Macron's politics. And the Macronists really tried to play the extreme, so hoping that people would rally up to the centrist vote, both against the Front National and against the left coalition, with a very strong demonizing campaign, to say the least. And this actually backfired because not only did they not win a majority, but people wouldn't want for Macronist or the left against the Front National, and this allowed them to be a tidal wave in the parliament. And I've read for a couple of well-documented news sources that even though the first round of the parliamentary election had been lackluster for the Macronists, that they really thought that they would get an absolute majority. Like, it had never happened before. People would come to their senses. People would vote for the centrist, for the reasonable option. They had really built themselves to be the camp of reason, the camp of nuanced, moderate government, and failing to get an absolute majority was actually a huge shock. And paradoxically, another poll this week showed that more than 60% of respondents were actually glad that he didn't get an absolute majority and that he would be forced to compromise after 5 years of absolute presidential power. So that there is a shift, but I feel like for fairly deeply rooted reasons, and it's not going to be turned overnight.
And what is the alliance or the pact expectations? Does he get enough just with that? Does he get enough votes to pass meaningful legislation just by getting the conservatives to rally behind? Or not?
So, as in any twisted relationship, it's complicated. But before that, I really want to share the part of the speech that President Macron made 3 days after basically losing the election. I mean, winning a relative majority, which was really a loss. So he made a whole speech before leaving France for International European Summit, and this speech was, in my opinion, really, really baffling. So obviously he was trying to minimize the failure to get an absolute majority. He said, but we only missed about 30 parliament members out of 577. And so we're off to a bad start because it was not 30, it was 44. So we're already there.
Well, if you round down, it's 44, it's like 30.
Yeah, exactly. It's rounded up to the lower decimal. And he say, of course, the country expressed will for change, but he also insisted that he, quote, will never lose the coherence of the project you chose last April, so during the presidential election. And he's saying that he got a clear legitimacy based on the basis of a clear project. And this also got a ripple of comments because he was really re-elected against Marine Le Pen, and because a lot of voters, especially on the left, mobilized not to have Marine Le Pen as a president. And it had been his strategy all along, the Macronist party in general, just push the far right enough, just to give them media exposure and give exposure to their theme, security, immigration. And then when we are against the Front National, we will still get opposition votes from people who don't want the Front National to get into power. And so starting straight away with, but I was elected on a clear project, which he was not. He almost did not campaign for his re-election, and there is very little in his project apart from a couple of very emblematic reforms, such as the pension reform, so pushing back the pension age to 65. To 65. And so the notion of saying the project is clear, I was elected on the project and I've got to move on without even a bit of questioning, it's a bit baffling. Yes.
Well, Amor, I think that his project is crystal clear. To me, it's transparent, and I can easily guess what his policy leaning is going to be, what his recommendations for renovation of the education system is going to be, and isn't it? It's rather clear. He's advocating for privatization. He's advocating for making more competitive, making France more capital competitive. I'm not saying that I agree with and I don't agree with the principle and in reality with the actual benefit for societies as a whole of that kind of policies, but it feels pretty much like a Bill Clinton or a Tony Blair or a whoever third wave socialist ruling.
Yeah, I would say.
Well, not even even a bit more centrist. So 2020's the capital and entrepreneurship is going to save us all.
Yeah, I would say it's very obvious when you know about politics, when you've seen many governments who also had this sort of new left social neoliberal inkling. But when you know Macron's general career, but it's not obvious from, I would say, I really think from a public perception, because again, what comes through the mainstream media, it's mostly security, immigration, and there was no real presentation of the program. When he was elected in 2017, he didn't have a program at all. It was just on his personality and promise of making French politics, of renewing French politics, and indeed reforming France. But it's always very.
He has changed all the faces of the corruption.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. But
it's new corrupt politicians in
yeah. But getting back to Macron's speech of last Wednesday. So he said, yes, of course, the presidential majority has to be opened more widely. But then he said, loose translation, but it's a quote, the different formation in the parliament need to clarify in the next few days how much responsibility and cooperation they are willing to take. Now, if you want to move forward, each political group needs to state in full transparency how far they are willing to go.
What does that mean?
What it means is that before leaving France for a European summit, he said to the opposition groups in the parliament, well, I was elected on my project. My project really need to move forward. So I'm asking you all guys to tell me who among you thespians are going to support me and vote for my reforms.
And has anybody shown their paw? Oh.
No, and first things first, this is not how parliament works, because that's what's fascinating right now is France is rediscovering parliamentarism, because I think what is underlined is that Macron was hoping just to form an expanded coalition. What happens in other parliamentary movements, it failed very quickly. I'm going to explain why. And now it means that it's going to have to negotiate reform by reform and law by law. But what he was doing was sort of flipping the responsibility. So instead of saying, okay, here is a law project, we present it to the parliament and we negotiate so that I get enough people to vote for it. It's just from the get-go, like, my project is legitimate because I'm president, so I am waiting for you to tell me which of you are willing to support me, and it's not going to work, because right now the presidential party is weakened because of this law. So obviously it's not going to be a massive rallying, especially with the sort of no, it's your fault, I don't have an absolute majority, so I need to know how many of you are going to make sure that I have an absolute majority so that I can just continue ruling from the Palais de l'Élysée on my own. And it's like, no, you lost the election, you're going to have to adjust and go through your mourning process and accept that, yeah, you're not going to be able to rule in a Jupiter absolute power. You have an actual opposition. And like I said, for me, it's really the toxic boyfriend that wants to say that, the breakup is entirely your fault, and you need to tell me how you're going to make it good for me, because I'm the one that's suffering. And it's like, no, you're shitty. Get over it.
I have a theory here, Amor, and it's that this is actually pretty privilege. It's the same that has happened with Pedro Sanchez in Spain. It's they both. You might not like them. I know that it's been he has done a lot of things for you to look at him as a non-attractive, non-pretty person. But both him and Pedro Sanchez, if you compare them with the Spanish president, if you compare them with the general population of presidents and whatnot, you have to say that they are the pretty club together with Justin Trudeau. So both Pedro Sanchez and him have done the same. For Pedro Sanchez, it took him like 3 years or something like that to start acknowledging that he needed to sit to negotiate with other people to set up a governing coalition. What do you think?
Yeah, that's fascinating, and I agree. I mean, as much as I dislike Macron politically, I absolutely know how he could work as a charismatic political figure. He also had a lot of savvy in the way he managed to get to the presidential election in 2017. So when it is within his target range, it can be very politically savvy. And this is a move. And I would say under other circumstances, it could work. I would say with a stronger hand and with a less fractured country. But as it is, his speech of the speech that he did last Wednesday was just completely tone deaf. I think is a good way to state it. I know your previous question was what did the other group says, and where can he negotiate? So, like you said, the most obvious partnership would be with the conservative group. So the conservative have weakened, but not as much as they expected. They sort of so they had 100 parliament members last parliamentary session. They are now down to 60, which is way less, but they could have lost more, and it could be enough to have a coalition. However, the current leaders of the Conservatives have clearly stated that they want to remain in the opposition, that they will just negotiate step by step, because
between the Conservatives and Renaissance by Macron, they've lost 84 parliamentaries. 44 Renaissance, did you say?
No, Renaissance, is lacking 44 to get an absolute majority, but they lost even more because last mandature, just La République En Marche, so not even with the Allies, they had 313. So La République En Marche has lost at least 100 parliament member, plus 40 for the Conservatives. Yeah, it's a slap. That's no way around it. But right now the thing is that the Macronist party has already poached most of the Conservatives who wanted to be with Macron, and those who have remained Conservatives. In one article that I read, a Conservative parliament member anonymously said joining the Macronists now would be like boarding the Titanic while it sinks. And because clearly they are thinking of 2027, because Macron won't be able to run again. It's only 2 terms president in the French constitution, and he doesn't have a clear heir, apart maybe from Edouard Philippe, who was his first prime minister, who was a member of the Conservative Party, but it's really not certain that he's going to build here. So the Conservatives sort of have a long-term view saying that when the Macronists collapse, we will be back. We will be back to be the main right-wing party again.
And this is one of the huge challenges with politics, no? That it's this kind of slap in the wrist have consequences of 4 years of potential low mobility, low structural reforms that are dearly needed. So it's one of the parts that it's really disheartening about how to engage or how to keep a continued sense of motivation about politics, because yes, it's a slap in the wrist. Yes, I am happy that Macron is not going to be able to push some of the blindfolded neoliberal reforms he has in his back pocket. But at the same time, the whole country has a lot of needs, right? It's like there is need to renovate the plumbing and to change the sink and to change the electricity installation and for the next 4 years you're not going to have such a coalition to make it happen.
I would say yes, it is a major political crisis, and it could result in just a minority government who can just handle the day-to-day business but not pass significant reforms. At the same time, the current French constitution had a huge problem with this hyper presidential power, and yeah, it was time that there was rebalancing of forces towards parliament. So it's going to be a huge crisis for the time of the adjustment, but it's going to be growing pains for the French government. Just to finish about the potential coalition. Then the hope of the government, and they almost don't hide it, is to try to break down the left coalition so that they can grab the socialist and maybe some of the green and leave aside the La France Insoumise. But it's not going to work so well. I'll expand a bit more in the second one. And then there is a question of allying with the Rassemblement National or not, which was also the object of a bit of ambiguity from the Macronists, and we'll discuss it next time. But long story short, right now there is no clear path for the Macronists to get a majority and to vote. So this is an ongoing political crisis that I will keep following very closely.
Thank you very much, Amor.
Thank you.